Before you close your eyes tonight, let me take you on a little journey. Section 1. You wake to heat and a clay cup. Sweats you step barefoot into a Persian courtyard, where even the water seems to sigh with heat. You're in the middle of a desert, not a cartoonish one with bleached cow skulls and wiggly mirages, but a real, lived-in one somewhere in the plateau of Iran. The sun is already up, high and expectant, and you can feel it pressing against the back of your neck like someone peering too close over your shoulder. The sky is vast, a pale, powdery blue, and the air hums with the kind of stillness that only heat can create. You step out from a stone doorway barefoot. The stone beneath your feet is warm, but not searing. Not yet. The walls around you rise in tan and honey-colored blocks, smooth from centuries of hands brushing past them. You take a few steps, and in the center of the courtyard, a small clay cup waits on the edge of a basin. The cup is sweating. Literally. Tiny droplets of water bead on the outside like it's nervous. This is your first lesson in the Persian desert. Nothing cools itself accidentally. You pick up the cup and sip. The water inside isn't just cool, it's cold. Not icy, but enough to make you pause and glance around, because it shouldn't be possible. Not out here. Not in this heat. But here it is refreshing, almost suspiciously so. Welcome to the marvel of Persian environmental engineering. They made air move, water last, and heat behave all without electricity, which is more than most of us can claim with modern thermostats. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're listening from tonight and what time it is there. I love seeing the quiet corners of the world this channel drifts into. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun was already awake long before you. But the garden this oasis nestled behind high adobe walls is still half asleep. The shadows stretch themselves lazily across the tiles, and the small pool in the middle catches the light in thin ripples, like it's brushing its hair before the day begins. You stretch too. There's a slight breeze, just enough to brush against your robe and carry with it the distant scent of damp earth and figs. You pad across the courtyard slowly, adjusting to the textures beneath your feet, sun-warmed clay, soft tufts of grass, a stray petal from the pomegranate tree. The clay cup still sits beside the pool. You lift it again, noting how the outside of the vessel always feels cooler than the inside. Historians still argue whether this was intentional design or a happy byproduct of porous clay. But regardless, it works. The water stays crisp because of a natural form of evaporative cooling. As the water inside slowly seeps through the walls of the cup, it evaporates. Take in some heat with it. It's like the cup is sweating, and it works better than your office air conditioner. You run your hand along the pool's edge. The tiles shimmer slightly. Beneath this water, there's more going on than meets the eye. You're not just seeing a shallow decorative feature, you're standing above a piece of a complex system, out in the larger world. 1,000 paces from here and several meters underground. A qanat channels mountain water across the desert floor. You haven't walked to it yet, you'll do that later, but already you feel its presence. It's quiet, constant work, Every part of this space was designed with the heat in mind. The walls of the house are thicker than you'd expect, and made of a kind of sun-dried brick that insulates like a stubborn old quilt. The ceilings are high, and just above you, casting a diagonal swath of shade over the patio. A canvas canopy has been stretched, its fabric misted earlier this morning by the gardener with rosewater from the basin. The scent lingers, sweet, floral, a little tang of dust underneath. A breeze stirs again. You pause. It's gentle but not random. Someone or something is helping it along. You look up. There it is. A tall, narrow tower with slatted vents on all sides. The bad gear, literally, a wind catcher. It does exactly what it sounds like, reaches up into the sky and snags any passing air like a fisherman with a net. Once caught, the breeze is funneled downward into the living spaces below. And if the wind isn't cooperating, the bad gear can still create airflow through thermal pressure, making air move simply because the difference between hot and cool makes it necessary. You're standing in the middle of ancient passive climate control, and it's working. You're not sweating. Not much. The cup is empty now. You set it down. As you move through the house stone corridors, arched doorways, woven reed mats, you notice how your body changes temperature depending on where you pause. That isn't coincidence. The architects of this place understood how to curve a corridor just enough to keep a breeze rolling. How to place a door where it will tempt wind instead of block it. It's like the house breathes around you. You reach another shaded nook. Someone left a fan here made of palm fiber and stitched with a design of swirling blue ink. You pick it up but don't need it. The air moves just enough. You rest instead. Stillness. A beetle scuttles along the rim of the basin. Somewhere a bird chirps half-heartedly, too warm to commit. And the cup sweats again. You smile, because now you know it's not nervous. It's just doing its job. Section 2. The wind catcher knows where the breeze lives. Towering above the house, the bad gear silently scouts for the tiniest stir of air. The first time you see it, you think it's just a tower, nothing special. Just a tall, rectangular structure poking up from the roofline, capped like a chimney. But when the breeze tickles your face, even though there are no open windows, you start to realize this house is full of secrets. And the bad gear, that odd tower, is the biggest one. The wind catcher doesn't need to look dramatic. It isn't carved or gilded or shouting for attention. It just stands there, patient and confident, catching what most people wouldn't even notice, the faintest trace of moving air. You climb a narrow stairwell to the rooftop, where the sky presses down with dry brightness and the wind feels stronger, more playful. The tower rises above you now. You reach out and touch the base mud brick, sun-baked, solid. A few birds have made a home in the slats, but the airflow still moves freely. If you peer up into the vented slots, you can just make out the internal partitions, angled dividers that let the tower adjust for the direction of the breeze. Because yes, the bad gear is directional. It doesn't just hope for wind, it selects it. You step back. From this angle, it really does feel like the tower is breathing, drawing in air on one side, pushing it downward through stone shafts that snake into the lower rooms, and in some cases, channeling it over a basin or underground pool to cool it even more before it reaches your skin. Mainstream historians agree that this system, dating back thousands of years, is one of the earliest examples of passive air conditioning. Before fans, before Freon, before those awkward window units that rattle louder than they cool. And here's the wild part. The bad gear works better in dry climates than modern cooling systems. The less humidity, the more effective the evaporation. In other words, the worse the desert, the better the breeze. Not bad for something that looks like a chimney in denial. Down below, you re-enter the house. This time, you pay closer attention. The air feels cooler than it did outside, but not artificially so. It's not the fake chill of a convenience store freezer. It's subtle, like a shadow moving across your skin. You reach a small sitting room. The windows are covered in wooden latticework mashrabia that filters the sunlight into geometric lace. The air moves across the room in slow swirls, shaped by the tower above. You lie down on a cushion. The fabric is warm on top, cool underneath. In another house, another time, a servant might have opened and closed damp cloth flaps inside the wind catcher shaft depending on the hour, adjusting the flow like a conductor with a very sleepy orchestra. Some badgers even had small trapdoors at their base, creating suction with pressure differences between courtyards and rooms. It was less engineering and more poetry. Quirkier still. In certain towns like Yazd, some homes had wind catchers that weren't connected to their own houses but were used to cool underground cisterns instead. Imagine living next to a breeze tower you couldn't even enjoy. Cool air for the water, but not for you. And yet some scholars still argue whether the true origin of the badgir belongs solely to Persia. There are variations across Egypt, North Africa, and the Gulf. Maybe the idea was shared through trade, or maybe, as often happens, people in hot places just figured out similar solutions. Brains sweating in sync across continents. But Persia made it beautiful. Back on the rooftop, you lean against the parapet wall and gaze out across the cityscape. Every few roofs has a tower like yours. Some are crumbling, some have been modernized, turned into vents for satellite dishes or laundry lines. But many still work. And some nights, when the wind is just right, the city sings. The towers catch the breeze and funnel it downward. And if you listen closely, really listen, you can hear the soft sighs of air slipping through ancient bones. Not bad for a bunch of bricks and intention. You turn back inside. The air feels different now. You know what's carrying it. You know how it got here. And it knows you're ready for more. Section 3. Walking down into the cool earth beneath the garden. You descend into a qanat tunnel where water whispers and sandals stay dry. You head toward the stairs at the edge of the courtyard, the ones that angle down into darkness. The stone is cooler here. The light dims, but not in a frightening way. More like a library at closing time, or a cellar holding secrets too patient to rush. You duck your head and begin your descent. The steps spiral downward into the earth 7, then 14, then more. The temperature drops with every turn until your skin prickles with goosebumps. You exhale, and your breath feels heavier, moist, even. Something ancient is breathing down here. Not with lungs, but with patience and pressure and a trickle of running water. You've reached the qanat. It doesn't look like much, just a shallow channel carved into stone. With water whispering along it like it's telling a story, it's repeated for 1,000 years. But this little trench is part of a miracle. A qanat is a kind of underground aqueduct, an elegant, ancient answer to a brutal problem: how to bring water from the cool mountains into a scorched plain without losing every drop to evaporation. The Persians didn't build pipes or pumps. They tunneled miles away, high in the foothills. Water seeps into the ground from melted snow or springs. Instead of letting it flow above ground where it would vanish into the sky, engineers dig gentle, slope tunnels sometimes as deep as 30 meters below the surface that carry the water by gravity alone, all the way to the gardens, courtyards, and homes below. And these aren't random holes. They're mapped with meticulous care. From above, the access points look like polka dots stretching across the desert, shafts spaced at regular intervals for maintenance and ventilation, like the buttons on an invisible coat. You crouch beside the channel. The water's barely deeper than your finger, but it's cold, crisp, alive. You touch it, and something happens. An image forms in your mind. A worker, centuries ago, crawling through this same shaft with nothing but a wick lamp and a pickaxe, chipping away inch by inch. They weren't digging blindly. They were aligning with star maps, terrain memory, and sound, the tone of a tapped wall, the slosh of unseen currents. Historians still argue whether the earliest qanats date back 3,000 or 4,000 years, but most agree no civilization did them better than the Persians. Even the Greeks and Romans later adopted the technique. In North Africa, qanats are still used today, though they go by different names: fogaras, karez, aflaj. Different tongues, same whisper. Here's a fun detail: some regions had qanat police, not officers with clubs, but water regulators who monitored when and how water was distributed down to the minute. One wrong move, and you weren't just wasting water, you were robbing someone's shade, someone's cool. In some cases, families owned shares of water like stock, their irrigation times handed down like heirlooms. You lie back against the wall. It's cold. The kind of cold you only get from Earth that hasn't seen sunlight in months. You notice now how everything above you relied on this. The courtyard fountain, the clay cup, even the wind catcher some bad gears vented into qanat chambers, cooling the air by rushing it across the surface of this water before sending it back up. The desert wasn't fought, it was negotiated with. Then you hear it. A low humming, not mechanical, not even musical, just the sound of moving air against water, a frequency between feeling and sound. It vibrates the soles of your feet slightly. You follow it. Deeper in the tunnel, the passage widens into a holding chamber. Not quite a cistern, not quite a cave. There's a small niche in the wall just big enough for a person to sit. And so you do. It's not entirely dry. The stone is damp behind your shoulders, but it's comfortable. You imagine a servant once sat here, waiting for the water to reach a certain level. Or perhaps a gardener timed the first drip into the irrigation trough. Maybe even a poet came down to write where it was cool and no one asked questions. Because here's the secret: Persian gardens weren't just built on water. They were built on rhythm. Water didn't just appear. It was cued like music, delivered in time, tuned to the hour of day and season of growth. You close your eyes, and you feel it: the pulse of water meeting earth, air meeting clay, your own breath adjusting to the rhythm of something much older than clocks. This place isn't just cool. It's calm. It's carved quiet. And now, so are you. Section 4. Why shade is a status symbol. You tour ancient estates where mulberry trees and clever walls define the social order. You emerge from the qanat tunnels slowly, blinking in the sun like you've just woken from a nap taken in someone else's memory. The air outside isn't as heavy as before, not because the temperature dropped, but because you now understand what coolness costs and who built it. The courtyard seems different now, too. Not just pretty, not just green. Intentional. You begin to notice the walls first. They're not just boundary markers. They're part of the system. Each one stands thick and tall, not straight up, but ever so slightly angled. The better to bounce light away from key areas and hold shade where it's needed most. And those few that do catch the sun, they've been plastered in lime wash, reflecting light like soft mirrors and cooling the surrounding air. Then there are the trees. You hadn't thought much about them before. A few mulberries, a fig, a proud-looking plane tree leaning ever so slightly over the garden pool. But now, you start to see their roles like a stage play. The tall, high-canopy trees, date palms, reach for the sun and break its fall. Beneath them, a second layer of shorter, denser trees, pomegranate. Apricot forms a leafy cushion, and down by your knees, herbs and flowers soak in the dappled light. Not enough to burn, just enough to bloom. It's a vertical choreography of shade, and it's not accidental. You sit beneath a fig and trace the line of light across the garden floor. The walls and trees cast long shadows that move slowly but deliberately, like sleepy sundials. They're telling time just as much as the water clocks once did. Historians generally agree that shade was more than comfort in Persian garden culture. It was luxury, power, a visible sign that you'd mastered your environment well enough to relax in it. Anyone could sweat in the sun, but it took foresight, calculation, and a bit of geometry to stay dry and composed under a tree. There's an old saying translated loosely that goes, "A poor man builds a wall, a wise man plants a tree." Of course, trees take time, walls are faster, but in the long run, only one makes fruit, and only one gives you shade. You wander to the edge of the garden, where a high wall wraps around a narrow alley. There's a clever bit of architectural mischief here. A small side channel runs from the garden's pool out to this alley, where it irrigates a strip of vines crawling along the shaded base of the wall. This runoff doesn't just feed the plants. It cools the wall itself. Run your hand along the plaster. It's cool to the touch. This isn't just garden design. It's urban strategy. In hot cities like Yazd and Kashan, this logic extends across neighborhoods' shaded alleys, staggered roofs, narrow corridors that squeeze the sun and pull the breeze. And yet, the garden still feels intimate. That's the other secret. This isn't a space designed to impress with size. It's meant to be felt, crossed barefoot, tended by hand, lived in during the hottest hour of the day, when the rest of the city sleeps. You glance back at the house. A servant is adjusting a reed blind on one of the balconies. With a practiced flick, they roll it halfway down just enough to soften the light, but still allow air to slip through. Even the furniture seems to play along. Cushions and rugs in muted colors that don't trap heat. Clay tiles underfoot that warm slowly and cool quickly. Every object selected not just for comfort, but for cooperation with the sun. You sit again. This time, you choose a step in the shade where the air flows without being forced. You sip another clay cup refilled and sweating again. It tastes like it always does. Somehow, ancient. And from this angle, with the light shifting, the trees nodding, and the wall beside you humming with cool, you realize even stillness was engineered here. Even rest was designed. And you, lucky guest that you are, get to lie back and enjoy the one luxury hotter empires often forgot to build: relief. Section 5. The geometry of coolness. You trace the angular genius of courtyard layouts designed to bend sunlight like origami. You're not walking anymore, you're gliding. Or at least that's how it feels as you move deeper into the estate, drawn toward the very heart of it. There's something about the way this place holds stillness, not in the sleepy way of an empty house, but in the poised stillness of something that was built to be quiet, built to be calm. Ahead of you, there's another garden, smaller, tucked away behind a low-arched doorway, framed with mosaic tiles that shimmer in pale turquoise and indigo. This space isn't for show. It's private, shaded, whisper soft, a hidden quadrant, and in the center of it lies a mystery of angles. The garden's layout isn't random. It's geometric. 4 equal quadrants, divided by narrow water channels that meet in the center like a compass rose. This is the Shahar Bag, the classic 4-part Persian garden. You've probably seen a version of it somewhere without knowing. Spanish courtyards, Mughal tombs, maybe even a public park somewhere. But here, it's ancient and alive, not recreated or manicured. You walk slowly along one axis, your sandals brushing stone. The water in the channels trickles, just enough to break the silence. There are no fountains gushing or grand cascades here, just the sound of water choosing a direction. The Shahar Bag layout wasn't merely aesthetic. It reflected a blend of cultural, spiritual, and environmental logic. The 4 quadrants symbolize more than symmetry. They echo the 4 rivers of paradise, the 4 seasons, even the 4 humors of classical medicine. Historians still argue whether the exact meaning changed across dynasties, but all agree this form wasn't accidental. Each quadrant may be planted differently, one dominated by fruit trees, another by herbs, another by flowers, and another left open for gatherings or prayer. The diversity isn't just practical, it's climatic strategy. Different types of plants regulate moisture differently, creating subtle temperature gradients that your body feels before your mind catches on. You sit on the edge of one channel. The breeze arrives again, soft and slow, and it hits you. The water isn't just sitting here for the plants. It's part of the air system. The sun heats the garden walls. Air rises. Cooler air gets pulled across the water to take its place, and the whole space becomes a quiet convection chamber. And that intersection at the center, the place where all the channels meet, that's the engine. Often slightly sunken, always the coolest spot. You step to it and notice a small stone platform set just above the water's surface. It's wide enough for a cushion, maybe 2, just the right size for one poet and a pitcher of plum juice. There's no obvious fanfare here. But it's the most important place in the whole estate. The temperature here is several degrees cooler than the outer walls, a microclimate within a microclimate. It's the pulse of the garden. You lie back and watch the way the branches form a laced canopy above. Each leaf is positioned not by accident, but by centuries of pruning and planning. Even the way light dapples across your arm feels considered. The scent in the air shifts again, slightly sweet, slightly wet. You look to your right and see a narrow pot half sunk into the earth, filled with rosewater and mint leaves. A simple trick fragrance added not to impress, but to aid the illusion of cool. Your mind thinks fresh, and your body follows. Some say the chahar bag design also allowed for easy irrigation, since the 4 sections could be watered in turn with minimal effort. Others believe the symbolism came first, and the practicality followed. Honestly, it doesn't matter which is true. What matters is that it works. You lie there longer than expected. The sun creeps higher, but the heat doesn't follow. The garden has taken that energy and diffused it, stretched it thin, folded it into itself like a tightly written verse. At some point, a bird lands on the edge of the channel. It sips, blinks at you, and flies off. You don't move. Neither does the breeze. And in that moment, with the garden geometry breathing around you, and the channels tracing lines between sky and stone, you begin to feel less like a guest and more like a part of the pattern. You've entered a space designed not just to be seen, but to be lived through. And you're doing it beautifully. Section 6. Date palms and pomegranates. Speak in layers. Layered tree canopies create a living temperature gradient and a fruit buffet for stray goats. You wake, or maybe you never quite slept, beneath a canopy of pomegranates and palms. Overhead, light dances through the layers of green like lazy embroidery, soft and half-hearted in the best way. The garden is still, but not silent. A bee hums somewhere above your ear. Leaves rustle occasionally, just enough to remind you that this is a place with its own breath. And now you notice the trees, not just 1 or 2, but layers of them, stacked like the verses of a poem. The tallest one's palms reach up like dancers holding the sky. Beneath them, a second layer mulberries, citrus, almond, and fig. Still lower, shrubs and rose bushes nestle against low garden walls. And at ground level, peppermint, thyme, and chamomile sprawl like gossiping children, whispering at ankle height. It's a forest designed with rules, a vertical arrangement of cool. Each layer is doing something. The palms cut the harsh sun into strips, letting through only what's bearable. The middle trees hold humidity, catch breezes, and offer fruit. The undergrowth traps coolness at ground level, creating a microclimate. Not just a trick of architecture now, it's botany doing thermal magic. Mainstream historians agree this layered system wasn't just for food, it was air conditioning in leaf form. A natural system of evaporation, shade, and breeze catching that made every part of the garden feel like a well-kept secret. You wander to a small terrace at the edge of the garden and peer out at the street beyond. The difference is immediate. Out there, it's bright, flat, and loud with heat. Inside, the garden cradles you in softness. You duck back in. And here's a curious detail. The fruiting schedule was sometimes staggered intentionally, not just for taste, but for air quality. Apricot trees perfume the spring. Figs dropped sweetness in summer. Citrus bloomed in early fall. That means the garden didn't just smell fresh. It changed its scent palette across the seasons like a rotating wardrobe. Even the placement mattered. You might find jasmine tucked near a water channel, where it could grow wilder and lend its aroma to the evaporation cycle. Lavender and basil often lined the edges, doubling as natural insect repellents and low, leafy insulation. And speaking of surprises, some historians argue that Persian gardeners may have deliberately invited certain animals like nightingales or bees not for pollination alone, but to contribute to the soundscape of the garden, a sort of gentle, curated background music. White noise for empires. You pass under a trellis now woven with grapevines and dotted with unripe fruit the size of marbles. The trellis shades the walkway and casts mottled shadows on the path. More art than function, but effective nonetheless. Even the shadows here know how to perform. Another breeze stirs, and a few pomegranate blossoms flutter down in your path. You pause, letting one land on your palm. Its petals are bright crimson, edges curled like they're already remembering autumn. The gardener appears again. You've barely seen him, always a step ahead, always just out of view. He waters the base of a fig tree with a slow, practiced motion. His jug is clay, stained from decades of use. He hums a tune, something wordless and even, as if the garden expects it. You nod at him. He nods back, wordlessly. Because in this space, silence isn't awkward, it's expected. The plants are listening. At the far corner of the garden, a strange patch catches your eye. It's bare, save for a small platform with 3 clay pots arranged on top. You walk closer. One pot is filled with basil. Another holds chilled water. The third is just a cup resting upside down. But as you lift it, you feel it cool, wet, and slightly fragrant. The gardener has left you a drink, and the garden layered, scented, shaded. Breathing is inviting you to linger, not to do anything, just to exist in cooperation with its systems. You sit down, cross-legged, near the basil. The cup smells faintly of mint and earth. The air wraps around you like gauze, soft, loose, and cool from below. And in that stillness, you realize something. It's not just the trees that are layered. It's you. The heat peels you back, but the garden rebuilds you layer by layer, breath by breath. And somewhere, high above, the palm fronds wave not in greeting, not in goodbye, but in rhythm, as if they've always known you were coming. Section 7. A pitcher that perspires on purpose. You drink from an ewer whose porous clay leaks just enough to chill your water. You don't realize how clever your cup is until you really look at it. It's clay. That much you already knew. But not the thick, glossy kind used for dinnerware. No, this one is pale, unglazed, a little porous. You tap the side lightly with your fingernail. It doesn't ring, it thuds, softly, like a loaf of bread with a crust just right. You turn it in your hand and notice faint, uneven ridges, evidence of a potter's fingers and a spinning wheel somewhere far away. In time, this is a zir, or more specifically, a kind of porous earthenware ewer used across Persia, not just to hold water but to cool it. It sweats. That's the trick, not metaphorically. like you do under a deadline, literally. Water seeps through the microscopic pores of the clay, evaporates at the surface, and in doing so steals heat from the remaining liquid inside. The process is slow, silent, and continuous. You set it down on a low ledge in the shade. After a moment, you notice something delightful. The cup is cool even though nothing touched it. Not ice, not metal, just air, water, and time. Evaporative cooling. Basic, beautiful science. Mainstream historians explain it in chemistry terms: latent heat of vaporization, ambient temperature gradients, vapor pressure differences. But you don't need to memorize any of that. You only need to hold the cup, sip the water, and marvel that something this low-tech still outperforms your refrigerator when the power goes out. These cups had names zir, kuze, sib, matki, depending on the region. Some had narrow necks to slow evaporation. Others were shaped like pears to balance easily on donkeys or shelves. They often came in pairs, one slightly larger than the other, nested to create extra cooling with the space between. You start to wonder, how did people know this would work? Did someone, long ago, leave a jug out and return hours later to find the water unexpectedly cold? Did they try to recreate the effect on purpose, or was it a gift of accident and observation? Historians still argue whether this form of evaporative pottery originated in Mesopotamia or deeper within the Iranian plateau. But again, it doesn't matter. What matters is that it stayed, it worked, and it was beautiful. Now here's the quirky bit. In some households, these water vessels weren't just tools, they were almost characters. Families gave them names. Children were told not to wake the water inside too suddenly. In poetry, the sweating jug became a metaphor for patience, or longing, or heartbreak held in silence. One 13th century poet even wrote that to hold a cold cup in a hot hand was to hold summer's secret by the throat, which feels dramatic, but kind of accurate. You take another sip. Even now, after all the breeze catching, the underground tunnels, the garden geometry, you're still charmed by the simplicity of this sweating cup. The way it cools by doing nothing, by just existing in the right shape, in the right material, under the right circumstances. You rise, taking the vessel with you, and wander back toward a narrow shaded passage where a trickle of water runs in a groove along the wall like the garden is humming to itself. You place the cup near the channel. In this spot, it will continue to cool as it waits, and it will wait. No rush. That's its job. You lean against the stone wall and let your hand trail in the tiny stream. This whole system house, garden, vessel, air was built on quiet cooperation, on slowing down, on using what was already present in smarter ways. It didn't demand power. It asked for patience. And as the afternoon heat grows heavier in the world beyond the walls, inside this garden, inside this moment, your cup is still sweating gently, calmly, efficiently, just like you. Section 8. The Scented Science of Evaporation. You sprinkle rose water onto tiles and learn how aroma was part of thermal management. You follow the water again, not rushing, just ambling alongside it, as if the stream itself knows where it's going and you're simply polite enough not to interrupt. The trickle leads you past a row of flowering shrubs and into a tiled alcove, where something strange is happening. The air smells cooler, not just wetter, cooler, fresher, with a kind of sweetness that sits in your nose the way cold lingers on the inside of your wrist. You look down. The tiles are damp. And then you spotted a small bowl, glazed in blue, resting on a ledge in the shade. Inside is rose water. Not much, just a splash. But the scent floats, lifted by the warm air rising from the stone. The heat pulls the fragrance upward, and as the rose water evaporates, it takes the warmth with it. You walk past another window, reed blinds drawn, fabric panels misted lightly with more rose water, and realize this scent isn't decoration. It's part of the thermal strategy. You're not just smelling history, you're walking through it. The use of attar-perfumed water wasn't about romance or luxury, at least not entirely. In many parts of the Persian Empire, especially during the sweltering summers, scent was practical, clever. It marked the presence of coolness and sometimes created the illusion of it. Some scholars still argue whether the addition of rose, basil, or citrus oils actually enhanced the rate of evaporation. Others insist it was purely psychological, a way to trick the brain into feeling fresher. But stand here now, inhaling that soft, peppery rose scent, and you'd probably agree it works. Whether chemically or emotionally, you feel cooler. There's another layer too. In elite households, scent served as a quiet signal indicating where guests were welcome. The more delicately perfumed a room or walkway, the more likely it was part of the family's receiving space. A dry, unscented corridor, private, off-limits. Practical air zoning, 10th century style. You wander into a larger room now, a summer hall, open on 3 sides, with a tiled floor that still glistens from a recent rinse. The breeze filters in, bringing the garden with it, and at the center of the space, there's a simple trickle fountain. Low, no splashes, just a few curved spouts pouring water in slow arcs across glazed stone. This, too, is scent-related. The water here has been laced subtly with orange blossom extract. You wouldn't notice it unless someone pointed it out. But once you know, you can't not notice. Every few minutes, the breeze shifts, and a hint of citrus drifts across your face like a sigh from a more elegant century. And here comes the fringe tidbit in some households. Water carriers, usually teenage boys or girls, were trained not just in temperature timing, but in scent layering. They'd walk from room to room with small flasks of perfumed water, dabbing cloths, misting reeds, and refreshing fountains with a practiced hand. A mobile HVAC system, wearing sandals and humming lullabies. You lie down on a cushion in the corner of the room. The pillow smells of something too soft to name jasmine, maybe, or just sun-warmed linen. Your skin feels slightly damp, but not sticky. Your lips taste faintly of basil. You're beginning to suspect that nothing in this house happens by accident. Even the quiet has layers. And now that you've felt how scent can cool, can soften, signal, and soothe, you'll start to notice it everywhere. In the way the morning breeze carries the garden through the curtains. In how a drop of rose water makes a clay pitcher taste like memory. In how, even now, as your eyelids dip a little lower, your breath deepens without thinking, not because you're tired, because the air has been prepared for you, with fragrance, with care, with a whisper of water, and a hint of rose. Section 9. A garden built like a cross. You walk the four-part Shahar Bagh plan and decode its spiritual and seasonal logic. You rise slowly, lazily, like dough in a warm kitchen, and make your way back outside. The light has changed again. It's that late afternoon gold now, the kind that turns everything gentle. Even the walls seem to glow. Even your shadow seems to stretch itself out. Relaxed and unconcerned, you wander toward the back of the estate, where the garden narrows into a more formal channel, an axis, really paved with bricks in a herringbone pattern and framed by two neat rows of cypress. At the end of it, behind a screen of vines and dappled light, sits a small pavilion with a raised platform and a view so symmetrical it makes your shoulders drop just looking at it. This is the crossroad, the centerpiece, the Shahar Bagh's geometric soul. You step onto the platform and sit. The stone is warm beneath you, but not hot. From this position, you can see all four quadrants of the garden. Each section radiates from this central water channel, perfectly balanced not just for aesthetics, but for climate control. You're sitting inside a living equation. The channels themselves, long, shallow, barely rippling, aren't just symbolic rivers. They're evaporative engines. As water trickles through the center of the garden, it feeds the air, cools the stone, and provides a mirrored sky underfoot. On especially hot days, caretakers would sometimes splash water across the tiles around the platform, effectively turning the courtyard into a low-tech cooling pad. You lean over and trail your fingers in the water. It's cooler than expected. It hasn't moved far from its source, and yet it already feels as if it's been blessed by mountains. Some historians believe this central cross pattern predates Islam, Zoroastrian symbolism, Sassanid spatial logic. Maybe. Others say the form spread eastward from Mesopotamia or westward from Indian steppe wells. The truth is still debated, but what's not disputed is its influence. This one form, the fourfold garden, ripples across empires: Mughal India, Moorish Spain. Even the grand gardens of Versailles borrowed from the bones of Persian geometry. But you don't need to think that far ahead. Right now, it's just you in the center. You close your eyes, and the breeze seems to make more sense here. It flows up one channel, then across another, making little right-angled turns as if politely following the floor plan. A wind behaving itself. Here's a curious fringe detail in some royal gardens. This center axis wasn't just a water crossing, it was a sound trap. The intersection of water channels amplified the soft splashing, allowing conversations to be carried with less effort. Whisper-level acoustics for courtly exchanges, poetic recitations, or, more likely, the slow slouch of afternoon gossip. You stay for a while longer than you meant to. The light keeps shifting, and every minute brings a new angle, a new reflection. Somewhere off to the side, a pomegranate drops into the grass with a muffled thump. It startles a dove, which flutters off with exactly the amount of drama that moment required. And now the air smells faintly of fig leaves and warm stone. The geometry isn't just in the lines, it's in the feeling. You are held, balanced, cooled not only by temperature, but by symmetry, by proportion, by the sheer rightness of space that knows what it is. You run your fingers over the tiles. Some are cracked, some have been replaced, but the pattern holds. That's the garden's magic. It doesn't fight the heat. It shapes it. It doesn't erase the world. It arranges it. And here in this exact center, with a breeze in your hair, the water whispering past your elbow, and the long shadows of 2,000 years stretching quietly around you, you begin to understand why so many emperors, architects, and gardeners kept coming back to the same form. Because paradise, it turns out, isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a pattern. Section 10. A ceiling that drips on schedule. You nap under a dome with a slow drip fountain engineered for maximum mid-afternoon misting. There's a part of the house that always feels cooler than the rest. Not the garden, not the sitting room, not even the shady alcove where the wind catcher lets out its slow exhale. No, this is different. You step through a low archway and find yourself in a domed chamber, round and hushed like a whisper inside a seashell. At the very center of the floor, a small fountain trickles, one of those soft, hesitant ones that sounds more like breathing than water. Above, a single oculus in the ceiling lets in a beam of sunlight, perfectly vertical, like a sundial that forgot to move. This is the summer room. You lie down on one of the wide stone benches that ring the walls. They're just high enough to sit comfortably, just deep enough to recline, and when you stretch out carefully, so the cup of water you're holding doesn't slosh, you feel it. The drip, not from the fountain, from the ceiling. A tiny, deliberate drop of water falls, hits the tile with a soft plink, and vanishes into the channel that runs around the room's perimeter. A second drop follows, then a third. The pattern is slow, steady, almost hypnotic. It's not a leak, it's a design. The ceiling above you, domed, painted faintly with floral spirals and constellations, holds a clever secret. Thin clay pipes, fed by a rooftop cistern or elevated channel, slowly release water across the top of the dome. The moisture cools the clay cools the air. And then, at a carefully calculated interval, the ceiling sweats, one drop at a time. It's the slowest air conditioner you've ever experienced, and possibly the most poetic. You shift slightly and let one of the drips fall onto your wrist. It's cold, not mountain stream cold, not ice bath after gym class cold, just enough to make your body say, yes, that's better. Mainstream historians love this kind of thing. Passive cooling systems that don't require bells or buzzers, just pressure, gravity, heat rising, water waiting. Some qanat-fed homes had multiple domed rooms like this, each one calibrated for different seasons. The winter rooms were smaller, low-ceilinged, with thick walls to trap warmth. But the summer room, always high, always airy, always centered around water. And here's a lovely fringe fact: in some cities, there were public versions of these rooms, bathhouses, resting stations. Even libraries sometimes featured domed chambers with water drips or tiny canals running between the benches. People gathered not to socialize loudly, but to exist together in comfort, to share coolness the way you might share a breeze. You stretch again, arms flopped out like a cat who's given up pretending to be modest. Your palm rests on the stone floor. It's cold, not everywhere, but in patches. The parts near the walls are especially cool, likely chilled by air funneled from the wind catcher overhead. You wonder how long you've been lying here. The drips don't measure time in minutes. They measure it in relief, in stillness, in how long it takes for the last of the heat to leave your skin. Somewhere in the corner, a jug sweats into a shallow dish. You can't see it, but you can smell the faint note of lemon balm in the water. It mingles with the stone, the moss, the breath of the room itself. You think about how modern spaces are cooled. Fans, vents, units that beep and blink. Efficient, yes, but never considerate. Never this gentle. Never this slow. This room doesn't force the heat to leave. It asks, and the heat, surprisingly, complies. You exhale, deeply, slowly. A final drip lands just beside your temple. You smile, and you don't move. Section 11. When air had to be herded. You help redirect breezes through a mansion using reed mats, damp drapes, and clay grates. By now, you've stopped trying to guess where the breeze is coming from. It seems to arrive before you know you need it cool, subtle, as if someone left a window open in another century. You're back in the main house, stepping through a shaded corridor where the air bends around corners and carries with it the faint scent of water and brick dust. You turn left, no sign, no door, just an open arch, and step into a hallway lined with woven reed mats. The walls here are different, not smooth plaster, but latticed screens and open brickwork, riddled with holes like soft honeycomb. You're about to meet one of the garden's cleverest characters, the air itself. Specifically, the kind of air that's been trained. This part of the house is what historians would call a transitional space, a buffer between outside and in, and it's rigged, quite artfully, with all the tricks a household might use to herd the wind instead of just catching it. Above you, the wind catcher still reigns. You can't see it from here, but you feel its influence. The breeze snakes through high vents and slatted ceilings, then rolls down into this hallway like a silent guest. But the path isn't direct. No rushing gusts. Just soft currents nudged along by architectural cues. Here's how it works. The reed mats lining the hallway aren't just for aesthetics or privacy. They're damp, not dripping, but misted earlier by the caretaker. As air passes through the wet reeds, it cools. Not dramatically, this isn't an ice storm, but enough to take the sting out of the day. Then come the brick grills, a decorative pattern called moharabiye. You run your fingers along and it's carved in repeating hexagons, each hole angled slightly to channel the air in a spiraling way, like turning wind into silk ribbon. Scholars still debate whether these grills were based on mathematical formulas or evolved from years of observation and trial. Either way, they do something fascinating. They shape airflow into curves. They diffuse it. A soft wind enters, and a softer one exits. And now, perhaps the cleverest bit of all, comes the clay grate. Tucked at ankle level, near the base of the wall, is a low ceramic register. Behind it, a narrow tunnel running past the base of a garden pool. As hot air rises in the garden, it draws cooler air from this shaded corridor, through the moist clay grates, cooling as it moves. It's not a breeze anymore. It's choreography. The air is performing. You sit on a step and let the airflow graze your forearm. You don't know exactly where it started, or how many turns it made to reach you, but it feels intentional. like someone dialed a 1,000-year-old thermostat and said, "Let's be kind today." And there's a quirky tradition here, too, in some Persian homes. Children were taught to walk the air, following its path with bare feet to find the coolest spot in the house. It became a game and instinct, like seeking shade without being told, like learning the hush of a quiet room without ever being shushed. You walk now, barefoot, tracing one of these paths. The air shifts as you pass reed, then plaster, then brick. Each texture offers its own signature. Each turn feels slightly cooler, as if the house is guiding you not to the most important place, but to the calmest one. And when you reach the end of the corridor, you step through a door into a semi-open, Iwana vaulted outdoor room with 3 walls and 1 open side. The breeze is waiting for you here too. It's made the journey just like you have. You lie down again, not because you're tired, just because that's what this space is asking for. The wind doesn't rush, it waits. And the house patient, porous, precise, continues to breathe in rhythm with your own chest. Section 12. The secret role of the garden servant. You spend a day in the sandals of the gardener priest who timed water like prayers. By now, you've started to suspect that someone has been following you, not in a sinister way, not even in a particularly attentive way, just present, quiet, as though at the edge of every cool room and beneath the brush of every breeze, a figure has passed just moments before you. It's not a ghost, it's the gardener. You finally meet him properly in the early evening, when the sun slips low enough that the walls stop defending you from the heat and simply surrender. You're standing beneath a vine-covered awning, watching pomegranate blossoms scatter like crimson confetti onto the path. And he appears around the corner like he's always been there. Barefoot, tunic damp from splashed water, arms tanned and strong, carrying 2 copper buckets that swing in perfect rhythm. He nods. You nod. That's enough. Because here's the truth, none of this works without him. The Persian gardener Bagban was never just a groundskeeper. He was part engineer, part priest, part magician. And today, you follow him. You carry nothing, just your curiosity. He moves with purpose, but not haste. At one corner of the courtyard, he kneels and opens a small, hidden channel in the stone revealing the irrigation flow. It's not gushing, just a gentle stream, like someone telling a secret. He dips his fingers into the water, then touches the soil beneath a fig tree, nods to himself, closes the channel. Then he walks 12 paces precise, rehearsed, and repeats the process at another spout. It's all timed, measured not by clocks, but by instinct. Some historians argue that traditional irrigation schedules were passed down orally, guarded by families like recipes or lullabies. Others believe the gardeners used early water clocks to divide the flow: half an hour for the herbs, an hour for the pomegranates, 10 minutes to soak the shaded roses. You continue walking. Every so often, the gardener pauses to adjust a reed screen or mist a pot with scented water. He doesn't write anything down. He doesn't need to. The garden is his notebook, the qanat his sentence, each tree a comma. Here's a curious custom in some noble estates. Gardeners were expected to learn poetry, not to recite it, but to understand rhythm, because watering a garden wasn't just a task, it was a performance. If you rushed, the soil drowned. If you delayed, the leaves wilted. It had to be right. And poetry, oddly enough, made the timing feel natural. You stop beside a citrus tree that leans slightly into the path, as though eavesdropping. The gardener taps the trunk twice, just checking. He runs his hand along the underside of a leaf, inspects it for pests, then flicks a small beetle away with gentle indifference. His hands are cracked, not from neglect, but from knowing what clay, water, and bark feel like in all seasons. He moves like someone who no longer thinks about his steps. His feet already know the path. And then he does something small but unforgettable. He takes a piece of cloth from his belt, dips it in the irrigation channel, and ties it around a nearby pipe. Not to patch it, just to cool it. It's a signal for the next person, maybe, or for the air itself. The breeze shifts, slightly, like it noticed. You're not sure how long you've followed him. The garden has changed colors again. The sky now glows orange behind the latticework, and shadows stretch toward the pools like they're heading home. He looks over his shoulder. Rest, he says. Just once. Quiet. But it feels like the garden is agreeing with him. You sit, on the ground this time. The stone is warm, but not too warm. He vanishes around a corner, and you stay because this, too, is part of the system. The garden doesn't just need walls and wind and water. It needs stillness, observation, a rhythm that doesn't demand applause, and a gardener who knows how to move in time with everything that isn't hurried. Section 13. How the Wind Became Architecture. You run your hands along a wind tower wall that hums like a tuned flute. There's a sound you start to notice now that the sun has lowered its voice. Not the birds they've tucked themselves into nests between vines and shutters. Not the water that's always there, like breath, too familiar to be startling. This is different. It's a soft hum, low, tapered, like someone tuning a flute in another room, except it's not music. It's the wind catcher, again, singing. You stand at the threshold of a small chamber near the back of the house, one with no windows, no breeze, and no visible decoration. Just a plain door, and above it, high overhead, the open mouth of the bad gear looms like a watchful eye. When you step inside, the temperature drops immediately, not sharply, subtly, like walking into a whispered conversation. You don't move for a moment, you just stand there, because the air is moving not around you, but through you. You feel it slip across your arms, your ankles, even your hairline, not forcefully, more like an exhale from a wiser version of yourself. This room has a single purpose: to house the wind, that hum you hear. That's what happens when architecture listens to airflow. As wind is pulled into the bad gear depending on its direction, speed, and the inner partitions of the tower, it splits and spirals, sometimes singing. The tower has become an instrument, not quite a whistle, not quite a pipe, just something in between. And what's more, this wind is being tuned. You step forward and crouch beside the opening in the wall, a vent that leads, cleverly, across a basin sunk just beneath the floor. When wind hits water, it cools. When cooled air flows downward, It does so with weight, purpose, and direction. You press your palm to the floor. It's cooler here than on the walls, because the floor was part of the plan. Channels beneath the tiles carry that same air toward the more lived-in parts of the house, delivering the breeze with polite subtlety. Some scholars argue that the layout of these wind-catcher chambers resembles the principles of Persian music intervals, scales, dynamics. Just as a musician varies pitch and tone, the builder plays with volume, material, and angle. Even the size of the water basin alters the airflow's velocity. You don't need a physics degree to feel it working. You walk slowly around the chamber. There's a raised platform on one side where a cushion waits, likely placed there long ago for reading, or prayer, or simply drinking something cold while the rest of the house naps. You sit. The hum continues. Not constant. It pulses, like breath, like thought. And then another fringe detail. The tower sends you a surprise. A dry leaf, caught who knows how many hours ago, flutters down from the shaft like a paper crane lost on a thermal. It lands beside you, spinning once, then resting. You laugh quietly. The tower, it seems, has a sense of humor. In cities like Yazd, people used to measure their home's value by how well the bed gear performed, not how tall, but how effective. Some wind catchers were square, some octagonal. A few even had internal dampers, wooden panels used to fine-tune the breeze depending on the season. The most elaborate ones, they worked even when the wind didn't blow. Because hot air rises, and when the inside of a house becomes warmer than the outside, air escapes through the bed gear, drawing cooler air upward from the basement or courtyard. These towers weren't just catching wind, they were conducting it. And now, so are you. You lie back on the cushion, the leaf still beside you, the hum gentle and almost inaudible. It's hard to say where the air is coming from anymore. It's everywhere, nowhere. The whole house is breathing, and you are being breathed through. You close your eyes, not to sleep, just to listen. Section 14. Water Clocks and the Politics of Thirst. You sit beside a clepsydra and learn how time was once measured by irrigation. The next time you notice water, it's not flowing, it's ticking. You're in a smaller courtyard now, quieter than the others, more austere. The trees here are clipped and disciplined. The pool is long and narrow, more like a channel than a basin, and at its edge stands something strange, a tall ceramic jar with a single spout, and beside it, a row of evenly spaced cups made from what looks like hammered copper. You sit on the low wall. There's a hush in the air, and then plink. A single drop of water falls into one of the cups. Another few seconds, plink again. This isn't a leak. It's a water clock, known as a clepsydra. This device kept time not with gears, not with sand, but with rhythm. Drip by drip, minute by minute. It turned water into hours, into schedule, into law. You lean forward, curious. The spout releases another drop, this one landing exactly into the second cup. It takes nearly a full minute to fill, and when it does, a servant, or once, perhaps, a robed official would have moved a peg, or called the next guest, or opened a gate. Because in some Persian cities, especially those reliant on qanats, time wasn't marked by bells, it was irrigated. Here's how it worked. Families had designated shares of water, sometimes measured in garas, which corresponded to a certain number of drops, or filled cups, or the turning of a small floating bowl in the basin. When your time came, your channel was opened. When the clock signaled your turn was over, it closed. And this wasn't a game. It governed fields, gardens, baths, even drinking water. Entire economies flowed on this schedule. Entire disputes rose and settled according to the sound of a single drop hitting a cup. Historians still argue whether the origins of the Persian clepsydra came directly from Babylonian models or developed independently alongside Indian and Greek counterparts. But in no other culture did the water clock tie so tightly into daily resource distribution. It wasn't just a tool, it was a contract. And here comes the quirk in some towns. The water clock manager, called the mirab, was considered more trustworthy than the mayor, not because he had more power, but because everyone watched him. He sat near the clock, recorded each interval, and settled disputes with the impartiality of someone who literally worked by the drip. You stretch out on a carved bench and let your fingers dangle into the edge of the channel. The water is motionless, except for the tiny ripple made by each drop from the clepsydra. In the old days, families might have built their homes near the central garden just to hear the clock at work. It was a kind of public reassurance. Time was still passing. Order was still in place. No one was stealing your hour. You close your eyes. Drip. A moment passes. Drip. Another cup nearly fills. Drip. You smile. The world isn't rushing. It's remembering how to move slowly. And for now, you belong to the same rhythm, not of hours or alarms, but of water, of patience, of understanding that some things are best counted one drop at a time. Section 15. The Garden Where Alexander Lost His Cool. A legendary tale, maybe apocryphal, has the conqueror begging for shade under Persian pines. You leave the courtyard of the water clock feeling like time itself has softened. Not stopped, just loosened, like a sash untied. You walk without aim, letting your feet choose, until the garden path curves gently around a low hedge and reveals something unexpected. A small grove of pine trees. Not native, not grand, just tall enough to cast slender shadows across the stone. They stand in a tight cluster beside an older section of the garden wall, one that leans slightly, like it's tired from centuries of holding everything in place. And there, at the base of the middle pine, is a bench, long, flat, carved from worn limestone. Many someones have sat here before. You sit too. This is the spot where, legend has it, Alexander the Great lost his cool. Not in battle, not in a storm, in a garden. The story is fuzzy. Historians still argue whether it was in Persepolis, or Susa, or somewhere deeper in the interior, maybe even in a private estate near the Dasht-e Kavir. But the tale remains deliciously consistent that Alexander, sweating through his Macedonian armor and thoroughly unimpressed with the shade offered by olive groves, found himself brought to a Persian garden and was floored, not by the columns, not by the gold, by the breeze. The account goes that he entered a courtyard, already flushed with heat and dust, and sat beneath pine trees just like these. A breeze moved through the corridor, whispering over a shaded pool, carrying a floral scent, brushing his face like a compliment, and for a full 10 minutes, he said nothing, just sat, breathing, Mainstream historians agree that Alexander deeply admired Persian architecture and customs. He famously adopted their dress, their titles, even some of their rituals. But this quiet moment in the garden, it might have been his first surrender, not to an army, but to design. And here's a charming twist. One of his generals reportedly asked how such a soft people had ever built an empire so vast. Alexander, still seated, supposedly pointed at the pool and said, "Because they engineered coolness." True, possibly. Apocryphal, also possibly. But either way, it's the kind of history that settles well in the mouth, like a chilled pomegranate seed, unexpected, a little tart, entirely satisfying. You lean back now and feel the pine needles shift above you. They're tall and swaying, but somehow still. The breeze curls through them like a ribbon pulled through water. It moves not fast, but wide, hugging the space rather than rushing through it. And the view from here straight down a channel of trimmed cypress, flanked by grapevines and backed by a small pool whose water surface mirrors the trees perfectly. You can see why someone might drop their sword and take up sandals instead. The bench you sit on is cracked, not broken, just aged. It's long enough for two people, or one person lying sideways. You're tempted. But first you breathe. In, through the nose, cool, floral, layered with pine and something else you can't name. Out, through the mouth, slow, content, unburdened. You're not a conqueror. You haven't crossed deserts or burned cities. You've done better. You've sat quietly in a garden and let the breeze undo you. Section 16. When the desert pretended to be a paradise. You explore an oasis designed not just for survival, but for seduction, status, and stillness. Twilight in the desert arrives not suddenly, but like a slow exhale. The sun doesn't fall, it stretches, lengthens. It spills light across the tops of trees, and then seeps down their trunks until even the bark begins to yawn. And this is when the illusion begins, because you're walking now into a part of the garden that shouldn't exist. Or at least, it shouldn't exist here. The stones under your feet are smoother. The path widens. Low walls stretch out ahead of you, framing a long rectangular pool flanked by rows of flowering trees. And beyond that, arcs of ivy-covered pavilions, fountains flickering under soft torchlight, and tiled mosaics that glow without needing gold. This place doesn't feel like a desert. It feels like paradise pretending to be permanent. The ancient Persians were not interested in fighting the desert. They knew they couldn't win that battle. What they did do was craft illusions. Not deceptions, exactly, but precise, disciplined visions of comfort, of control, of cultivated coolness. You sit on the lip of the long pool and glance around. Every element in this corner of the estate serves a dual purpose. That trellis, yes, it guides vines, but it also blocks harsh western light during sunset. Those marble benches cool to the touch. Yes, but their curvature reflects sound, allowing conversations to be heard in a whisper from across the garden. You notice now how even the torches have been placed for reflection, casting their light onto pools or pale plaster walls, doubling their glow without more flame. Some of the most magnificent Persian gardens, like the ones at Fin Aram or Shazde, were built this way, not just for shade or scent, but to craft an alternate reality, a dream space, an oasis not just of water, but of perception. And here's the lovely, slightly absurd detail. Some visitors in the Safavid era wrote that the heat outside the garden made the inside feel colder than it actually was. That the contrast wasn't just physical, it was psychological. You believed in the coolness because you had escaped something. That's the key. The garden doesn't erase the desert. It reminds you it's out there. It makes you grateful. A breeze shifts again. You turn your head. It dances across your neck like a ribbon unknotted. You sip water from the same clay vessel as before, cool, still sweating, still reliable. And for a moment, your body forgets the word arid. It just is. You stretch your legs. The stone under your calves is cool but gentle now, like bread left on a windowsill. You lean back, supported by a carved cushion that you're certain wasn't here an hour ago. Someone has been tending to your comfort again. The stars begin to peek out. Not all at once, just a few at a time, like shy guests arriving fashionably late. And you remember something the gardener said, or maybe something you dreamed. The desert doesn't hate you. It just needs proof you'll listen. This garden is the proof. The water, the shade, the breeze, the scent of jasmine and wet earth, the soft gravel path and the rhythm of fountains. They're not resistance. They're dialogue. And you're listening now. You stay until the pool mirrors the sky, until the wind carries the scent of night-blooming flowers, until the illusion becomes so comfortable, so believable, that you forget it ever needed to be built. Section 17. Thermal Dreams and Moonlit Floors. You walk barefoot on tile that holds the night's chill like memory in stone. Night doesn't arrive all at once. It layers itself over the garden like silk scarves, dark, quiet, weightless. The air changes again, but not dramatically. You don't notice it right away. First, it's the tiles beneath your feet. They're colder now. They hold the memory of shade, of evaporation, of centuries. Then your breath becomes visible, just slightly. You watch it rise and vanish like something shy. And then you realize you're standing on a cool floor, chilled not by magic, but by moonlight and mathematics. This is the time when the garden gives its final gift of the day, thermal memory. You walk slowly through a pavilion with wide arches. The floor beneath your feet is made of pale ceramic tile, worn smooth and uneven by age. At midday, it would have radiated warmth, but now it's holding on to the night. It's cooler than the air above it, and your soles thank you with every step. Persian architects knew that night was an opportunity not just for rest, but for reset. So they engineered materials and surfaces that could soak up the chill once the sun had gone. Bricks, tiles, lime-plastered walls, all carefully selected not just for appearance, but for their ability to inhale the dark. You sit now on the edge of a shallow step, where a basin sits nestled between walls. No fountain, just water, still and dark as obsidian. You touch it, cold. And here's the trick. This basin was not filled during the heat of the day. It was filled after. The water, drawn from a shaded cistern, doesn't just decorate, it regulates. As the night cools the surface of the pool, the air above it drops in temperature too, slowly, smoothly, like a lullaby with no melody, just rhythm, and the tiles around the basin glazed in pale tones. Not for beauty, though they are beautiful, but because lighter surfaces reflect heat during the day and radiate cold longer at night. Mainstream historians agree this kind of passive thermal regulation is one of the great unsung achievements of Persian architecture. No fans, no vents, just smart surfaces and good timing. You lie back now, one hand resting flat on the floor. The stone is colder than your skin, and the contact feels like an answer to a question you didn't know you'd asked. Here's the quirky bit: some noble families believed walking barefoot across cold tiles at night prevented illness. They weren't entirely wrong. Cool floors helped regulate internal temperature, especially in summer. Even insomnia was treated. Now and then, with a midnight walk over damp tile. You try it now. Not far, just a few paces. Each step is a soft punctuation. Cool, quiet, satisfying. And above you, the stars have multiplied. You see a handful reflected in the pool. As above, so below. Somewhere in the distance, a wind catcher shifts the breeze. You hear it before you feel it. The air carries with it the scent of fig leaves and something metallic. Not sharp. Just the faint trace of cold stone kissed by night. You sit again, right at the edge of the water, and press your palm flat against the tile. You feel not just coolness, but certainty. This place was meant to recover. Meant to balance. The desert is not gone. It waits beyond the walls, always. But here, in this room, on this floor, with this breath of breeze and this curve of cooling stone, you are elsewhere. You are inside a memory built for relief, and the floor remembers you. Section 18. Persian ice cream and the art of frosting. Air. You try ancient faluda as it's chilled in a yakchal, a snow cone made by desert mines. If you thought the garden had given you all its secrets, you were wrong. Because just past the colonnade, through a half-open door framed in patterned brick and flowering vine, is something small and square and utterly unbelievable. You're about to taste ice cream in the middle of the desert. You step inside a squat, domed chamber. The air here is not just cool, it's cold. Your breath curls again. The walls are packed with layers of thick plaster, mud brick, and straw. Overhead, the dome arches high, tapering like the inside of a snow globe turned upside down. At the center of the floor is a shallow pit. Inside the pit, ice, real ice, gleaming, covered in sawdust and linen cloth. A servant smiling, silent, reaches into a clay jar and pulls out something that looks like a tangle of glassy noodles. She places it in a dish lined with crushed pistachio and hands it to you. This is faluda, and it's older than most countries. Rice starch, frozen and shredded into strands, flavored with rosewater, sometimes lime. The texture is like crunchy silk, the taste bright, floral, cold, and oddly timeless. You take a bite, and the spoon chills your teeth. And then you start to ask yourself the obvious question: how? How is there ice in this climate, in this century, in this moment? The answer is sitting beneath your feet. A massive underground dome called a yakchal, literally ice pit. These brilliant ancient refrigerators were designed not just to store ice, but to make it. Here's how it worked. During winter, water was poured into shallow outdoor basins next to the yakchal, often overnight. The cold desert nights far below freezing would freeze the surface. In the morning, The ice was broken into chunks and packed into the dome below, insulated with mud, straw, and a special waterproof mortar made from clay, egg whites, and goat hair. And here's the kicker: the design of the dome, paired with the thickness of its walls, kept the ice from melting even through the summer. Some yakchals even had wind catcher systems, using airflow to pull hot air up and away while keeping the cold trapped low. Historians still marvel at the efficiency. The inside of one of these chambers could remain just above freezing in August with no electricity, no mechanics, just design. A passive freezer, a heat-proof vault, and this one still working. You look around. Baskets of fruit plums, mulberries, even early grapes rest in nearby alcoves. Not preserved, just chilled. This room isn't just for storage, it's for comfort. In the Safavid era, nobility would sometimes host moonlit gatherings in or near the yakchal. Guests would sit on reed mats, wrapped in light shawls, sipping icy sherbet while the desert wind swept across the sky outside. The contrast: heat above, cold below, was part of the drama. And here's a quirky tradition: some households would carve blocks of yakchal ice into flower shapes, then float them in fountains as centerpieces. Not practical, just lovely. You take another bite of faluda. It's melting faster now, the rosewater scent curling into the chilled air around you. You chase a strand around the dish and feel, absurdly, like you've gotten away with something. Because you have. You've wandered into a secret room in a sun-drenched land, only to find the one thing that shouldn't exist: frost. You sit quietly. The servant refills your dish without asking. You nod your thanks, and as the chill settles into your skin, your bones, your thoughts, you realize coolness wasn't a luxury here. It was a philosophy, and dessert was proof it could be delicious. Section 19: Ruins. Still cooler than most apartments. You tour abandoned homes whose mud brick designs still trick the heat centuries later. It's hard to believe now, but the garden wasn't always this alive. Not every breeze blew, not every channel flowed. Somewhere, beyond the courtyards and cooling towers, outside the tiled domes and vine-laced pathways, you find what's left of a place long abandoned. The gardener mentioned it, casually, almost like a warning you wouldn't need. The old house, just past the almond orchard, empty, quiet, left behind. You go anyway. What you find is a compound, smaller than the one you've wandered until now. Its outer walls are cracked, the plaster peeling like old paint left out in too many seasons. But still, it stands. The bones are solid, and even now, in the cool of night, it feels ready. You step through the threshold. Dust hangs in the air like a curtain. Your feet stir the silence. A few leaves have blown in through broken windows, and yet beneath the stillness, the design remains. The garden at the heart of this ruined house is overgrown, but not chaotic. Vines still remember the trellis. Trees still lean toward the breeze. The central channel is dry, but the tiles lining it still glisten faintly with old glaze cobalt, emerald, faded ochre. And here's the wild part: it's still cooler here than outside, because the walls are thick, because the paths are shaded, because someone, long ago, built this space with such care that even neglect hasn't undone it. You step into what must have been the summer room, the same domed architecture, the same placement of vents and shallow basins. The breeze, though faint, still moves through it. The wind catcher above its top, long eroded, is broken on one side, but still functions on the other, like a tired violin that can still hum a note. Mainstream historians often note that these abandoned estates remain cooler than many modern homes, even when empty, even when half collapsed, because passive design doesn't forget how to perform. In one corner, you find a crumbled clay jug, half buried in dust. You brush it off. The shape is familiar now, narrow neck, sweating clay, a memory of water. You set it upright, gently, like a ritual, and then you sit, because even ruins deserve reverence. Here's a curious fact: in many parts of Iran, especially in rural villages, these kinds of spaces are left intact on purpose. Not because people lack the means to rebuild, but because there's a quiet understanding that these ruins are still working, still breathing. The old badgirs, though chipped and wind-worn, still catch air. The walls, though cracked, still insulate. The qanats beneath the floor, though silent, may still carry the occasional spring flow. There's a word for this feeling, though not always translated: khane ye be yad mande, a house that remembers. And as you lean back against the wall, feeling the stone breathe faintly against your shoulders, you know that this place remembers you now, too. You pick up a fallen fig leaf from the floor. It crumbles in your hand like paper. You let it go. The stars above are quieter here. No reflections, no fountains, just the hush of old design, doing what it was built to do long after its builders are gone. Preserve cool, preserve quiet, preserve dignity, even when no one's looking, especially then. Section 20. As the air still moves, so do you. You lie in a sleeping alcove as the breeze glides over your body and history exhales. It's late now, the kind of late that doesn't tick or blink or whisper, the kind of late that hums. You return to the main garden without thinking. Your feet know the path, past the vines, past the cooling tiles, past the cup that always sweats patiently beside the fountain's edge. Everything is quieter now, not empty, just content. You step into the sleeping alcove, a semi-enclosed veranda built low and long, with a raised platform covered in cushions and mats. A clay lantern glows in the corner. Someone has lit it for you, or maybe it lit itself. Hard to say at this hour. The air here moves even more slowly, as though time has thickened into syrup. You lie down. The cushion yields. The fabric is linen, slightly coarse, faintly scented with lavender, the kind that holds the day's story without retelling it. And above you, the wooden lattice filters starlight into soft diamonds across the walls. Breeze curls in through a high vent channeled from the badgir far above. It passes through damp reeds hung discreetly in the roof, cooled by the air it already knows how to hold. You're not in a room, you're in a system, and the system is singing you to sleep. From the corner, the faint drip of a nearby fountain. From above, the sigh of wind shaped by walls, domes, and corridors. From below, the memory of cold stone tiles kissed by midnight. You inhale slowly. Your chest rises. You exhale. The breeze answers. Persian architecture doesn't end when the sun goes down. It shifts, it settles, it adapts to your quietest needs. Coolness is no longer the goal. It's the background hum, the cradle, the silence that lets sleep come. Here's a final curious detail in some old poems. They say sleep in a Persian garden is the closest the body gets to forgetting it has bones. That's a strange phrase. And yet, here you are, your limbs weightless, your thoughts slipping gently behind your breath. You can't even tell what's breeze and what's dream anymore. You are still. The air moves, and history's soft, scented, structured moves with it. You're not in a story now. You're in the after of a story. The cushions beneath you are warm in the places where you lay. The air is cool in the places where you aren't. And above, the night sky settles into itself, stars dimming just slightly, like candles halfway through their own dreams. The fountain nearby continues its rhythm, not insistently, not proudly, just there, reliable, like a breath you didn't realize you were holding, and finally let go. The walls don't speak. They don't have to. They've been shaped by hands you'll never meet, carved by decisions older than memory, cooled by systems that obey no clock but the sun and the moon. And all of it, every tile, every tree, every carefully placed shadow has led to this moment, this stillness, this balance. Out beyond the walls, the desert waits, not angry, not harsh, just true. But it does not reach you here. Here, the night is folded, cooled, held. You are no longer wandering. You are no longer wondering. You are simply resting. Let the breeze finish the story. Let the garden keep breathing for you. Let the walls hold your stillness, and the water clock forget the hours. You've done enough. Sleep now. Sleep well.